everyone. Welcome to From Nowhere to Nothing, Ontological Oxymorons. I'm your host, Joel Bouchard, a graduate student in education at Liberty University. And with me is Mr. Norman Gayford, a professor of English and philosophy at Genesee Community College. Here's something you may have heard. Curiosity killed the cat. But did you know that the phrase continues on? Curiosity killed the cat, but satisfaction brought him back. Perhaps learning this tidbit brings you some satisfaction. But it doesn't necessarily make the phrase universally true. Many times, curiously searching for answers just raises more questions. If this isn't our first show that you've listened to, then you probably know the feeling. Today we're going to probe the depths of probing the depths by taking a look at curiosity. All right, so the intro there kind of sums up a little bit of what we do here and, the different outcomes that can come from it. Mm-hmm. Curiosity, we're going to have to dive into the essence of what it is, but lots of times the end result of curiosity, you don't know what it's going to be. And that's the whole point of being curious. Are you going to find an answer to something and derive some sort of satisfaction, or are you just going to open a whole other can of worms and be curious about 10 things when before you were only curious about one, Yeah. So let's take a look at it. What is curiosity?
Well, two things, depending on, so many definitions. So I'll take the secondary one first because I always like this. A curiosity is an object or an idea that is very strange to you, that you stop and look at and think about. Curiosity, the strong, powerful, driving desire, as you said, to know something, to learn something, to want to find out about it. But I like the curiosity. There are objects in everybody's homes that are curiosities.
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought that one up because I didn't know if you would go there or not. But I was recently, I saw an episode of a TV show about circus sideshows, which obviously have their own ethical and all sorts of
course,
implications. But it's one of those things where a circus sideshow or a circus curiosity that really sort of capitalizes on the first type as well. You have both types. You have a curiosity, and the reason that it's an attraction is because it causes people to be curious.
Yes.
Wow.
It does. Yeah.
If you see a circus banner and it advertises, a two-headed calf, or something. I kind of want to see what that looks like, and then you pay your admission.
Yeah. You're lured in.
Yeah, and whatever's on the other side of the curtain. Sometimes it's something. It can be a man in a monkey suit in a dimly lit room, and sometimes it can actually be something that actually is a scientific,
oddity. Yeah.
Right? But
yeah. So what curiosity is about is in fanning the flame of, which presupposes that there's a spark in the first place, of wondering about things, wanting to know. The word wonder is very interesting too.
Right.
And I think that's one we were bantering about.
Yeah, and that's something I think that we'll talk about a little bit later as well, is, we talked about awe and the sublime last week, and the crossover between curiosity and wonder or awe has an interesting place, not just in a modern conversation like ours, but if you go back to the Greeks, and some of the original Western philosophers, that's kind of a big topic there.
Well, it is, and if I'm going too far on this side, tell me. But I don't think this is going too far to the side. The interesting thing is when people say I'm curious about something, they alternatively say I wonder. But the initial meaning of wonder, theologically, having to do with, especially in medieval times, was a submissive kind of awe. Wonder was, in those terms, saying, wow, I can't possibly know how this works. I don't need to. I'm not supposed to. This is the work of God or something like that. So wonder was actually, don't be curious.
Right.
Just accept. And now wonder and curiosity are.
Yeah, let's go ahead. You know what? We can break all the rules we want because it's our show, so we'll forget the format for a second. And it makes sense because we just did awe and the sublime, so we'll make the connection now. So if we look at it a little bit historically, starting with the Greeks, the Greeks to the Greeks, curiosity was a very pejorative thing. Curiosity was embodied by just this disheveled woman who was a gossip, and you can find images and stuff.
Yes.
But essentially, to the Greeks, philosophy was inspired by, awe and wonder, and curiosity was, essentially this just kind of aimless, witless, gossipy, sort of idle, wanting to know things that you had no business knowing.
Yes.
Is essentially what curiosity was to the Greeks.
Yep.
So awe and wonder was what the philosophers were interested in. And, I feel like that's a really kind of pure idealistic view of philosophy. If you think about it, that's what it should be. If you walk out on a day like today and you're blinded by the sun, you can't quite look at it and you think, wow, like, where's that light coming from?
Right.
And that's obviously we are so encompassed with modern knowledge that I think we sort of lose that initial wonder. We can tell, the sun's a type G star that's 92 million miles away, blah, 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 blah. And it's all scientific and dry. But, you think of yourself as a Greek, 2,000 years ago, and you just think, where's that light coming from? Mm-hmm. And then you have to invent this kind of story. There's a lot of awe or wonder behind that.
There is.
It really isn't just idle curiosity at that point. It is kind of something more.
Right. I think the idle, that's the part. That's the which suggests frivolity, which suggests lack of commitment to following through on an idea. Wonder and curiosity of the kind we're talking now. Wonder, what was the word? Thalma in ancient Greece was, if not an organized approach, it was a committed and deep. You say, I wonder about that light. Mm-hmm. You're going to ask a whole series of questions. You're not going to just say, oh, I wonder about that light. Okay, now it's time to eat. Yeah. And I think that just got really twisted around when the church, again, in times of medieval, absconded with philosophy, took it over, essentially, made philosophy theology exclusively, and thus changed the rules, because even, in the founding story, you get in trouble if you're curious. Here's a tree. It has fruit. The knowledge tree. Mm-hmm. Don't touch it. I put it here at the center of the garden. Don't look at it. Don't touch it. And what is the fear behind touching it? Is that you'll become like God. Yeah. So I don't know. That has some implications for the motives behind. It has fascinating implications.
But so you come from 0 AD to 1400 AD or whatever, and you have almost an entire 180 swap of your views on curiosity versus wonder. Yeah. Originally, curiosity is a bad thing, wonder is a good thing, and then come medieval times, you're kind of, wonder is I don't know. It's sort of like you said. Religion has taken it over.
It is, and so wonder is an amazing thing, but it's in medieval times. It's the place is theological, and its place is essentially saying, be awed, be still, don't ask, just accept. Whereas curiosity was, I'm going to ask. I need to ask. I want to ask. And of course, that's not what the church was about. And still isn't for some for some groups, which is very interesting when you're teaching people. And you run into those walls. No, I'm not allowed to ask that. No, I'm not supposed to ask that. And here comes the liberal humanist who says, no, you're supposed to ask about everything.
Right.
There's a time and a place, but everything is up for questioning.
Right.
And so for me, that curiosity is something that I've, localized in teaching. I desperately need my students to be curious. I try to reach into where their curiosity is, but you as an education major have encountered this. I encounter it every week. It makes me sad sometimes because I'll have a student who will say, I have no questions. I don't question. There are no questions I can ask. So then, of course, I'll suggest some questions and try to get them moving. And some students take off with that and say, oh, I didn't know I could ask this. Oh, I didn't know I could, as if there was some restriction on asking something.
Right.
But then there are some few, I'd say probably a quarter of the students who just, it's totally alien. And I think part of that is where curiosity seems to be the enemy of utility in education.
Yeah, and that's definitely the way that the ancient Greeks saw it. Is that, if you're thinking of curiosity as an idle thing or a gossipy thing or whatever,
yes,
then essentially, while you're engaging in it, you're not doing anything productive or helpful. So, yeah, and what you just mentioned, all right, we covered some formative stuff with the history of it.
Yeah.
Now we're going to jump ahead into the speculative of it. We're just going to be all over the format with this episode. I'm all right with it. But
Good.
That was actually one of the speculative questions I had was, what's the link between curiosity and education in modernity? And, I'd kind of come to a similar conclusion as you had, which was that, and I was, in doing research for the show, somebody had written an article, an actual philosopher had written an article in the New York Times about how, the educational institution is kind of suppressing the curiosity within the field of philosophy. And what she was saying was that philosophers are naturally curious people. You really can't be a philosopher if you're not a naturally curious person.
Well, of course.
But she said that there's almost a dichotomous split where when you actually go to work as a philosopher, if you are hired as a philosopher for a company, they're paying you not to be curious, but just to regurgitate what you've learned in graduate school, the processes and the knowledge that you've gained in a systematic fashion to assist the company, not to actually take a problem and be curious about it and come up with a novel solution. And so,
yeah.
And I think that obviously that sort of sentiment doesn't just apply to the field of the academic field of philosophy, but really to academia in general. I think that the layout, how we've structured progress and the goal behind being educated in the first place kind of suppresses that curious part of what being educated means.
Be regimented. Adhere to the rules, which of course was given by the dominant class at any given time. And our rules are that, education and curiosity are interesting because initially education was for training ministers,
right,
and priests and so on. And then, this is fast forwarding through everything that you have studied, but then it becomes a utility kind of focus so that we make good citizens. Well, then we have to but philosophy would say, well, what makes a good citizen? That's precisely what Plato was asking.
Right.
In the Republic and Aristotle and but rather than say what makes a good citizen, we've already got the answer to what makes a good citizen. We have these 3 or 4 bullet points. And so we say, we're going to train you. Well, education and training aren't exactly the same thing. They braid, but they're not the same thing. And training is being taught to see things through a certain set of lenses, which can be enormously useful professionally. But training doesn't have to remove the curious function. But if students are given the impression early on not to ask, there's not enough time to ask. So we've got to cover too much, whatever the things are. Then you get to a place where people come to college, but they're already told that the first thing of the major point of college is to get a job. You got to go to college in order to get a good paycheck. I have student after student after student saying this to me because they've absorbed all of this propaganda that the culture has washed at them like a tidal wave, or better, a tsunami, because tsunamis can sneak up on you. And so I'm going off on this because without curiosity, then you're just in the mode of give me the things I need to know in order for me to put bread on my table.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not college.
Right.
It's a kind of training, but of a minimal kind. College is about that. How do I be the best nurse? But you see, there's a question.
Right.
It doesn't start with the position, we'll show you how to be the best nurse. It starts with the question, how can I be the best nurse? And I don't think we're doing nearly enough of that.
No, I think that we've really reached a point where all schools are vocational schools.
Yeah.
Which, I'm not bashing vocational schools.
Not at all.
Obviously,
not at all.
People need to be trained to do jobs, otherwise society doesn't function.
Right.
But doing that to the exclusion of limiting people who want to be educated for the purpose of curiosity's sake is difficult. I have a friend who he flies in the face of this whole thing because he has a very successful business doing timber framing for millionaires who want to build houses on Cayuga Lake and stuff. And the guy resurrected a 60-foot long pre-World War I machine that cut 10 by 10 logs. He retrofitted the thing all by himself, and
Brilliant.
He had no mechanical background, just taught himself about machines and stuff. And then, wanted to take some architecture classes in college, but didn't care about doing the whole degree program. Well, I don't need to do all that. I just need to do a couple classes on this. And he had to search around until he could find a school that would let him just take individual classes, and just probably the smartest guy I've ever met. Doesn't have any college degrees, but has taken a couple classes and was always curious. And that's all it took. He was curious. How does this machine work? And then the dedication to following through on that curiosity. Oh, well, this just seems out of place. This seems to be broken. This doesn't fit. And going all the way through, it comes up with an answer. The same way that the original philosophers would look at it, where's that light coming from? And initially you might be wrong, but as you kind of roughly hew away, eventually you get to the source of the problem.
There's where imagination comes in. What you just described about your friend is where imagination and curiosity link up. And I know you've read about philosophy and imagination too, but part of it is entering different perspectives, taking what you see, going beyond what you see, to see something in the future or to see something, re-see it in the past, or to think from a different viewpoint. You look at a machine, you're not trained in the machine. You have to have some imagination to say, what can I do in order to make this machine function? Well, first, what must I find out? I must find out how it works piece by piece. How will I do that? And so your friend was leading himself down the one merry Socratic path of asking the question, considering a response, asking the new question. Theodore Sturgeon, one of the best science fiction writers and editors and philosophers of science fiction in the 20th century, like there were more than one. His mantra, he wrote this marvelous essay in 1970. His mantra was, ask the next question, or what is the next question, but usually it was ask the next question. And he created a symbol, a Q with an arrow through it. Sometimes it's rendered as a lightning bolt or whatever, because he said you've got to do that as a writer, as a thinker. And if you're alive in any profession at all, you better be asking questions. Mm-hmm. So he was really pushing that.
Yeah. Yeah. So we'll try to get back on track here. Mm-hmm. So we've talked about a lot of stuff so far, but if we're talking about what is curiosity, or what things sort of constitute it, so now we've gotten to the point where we have a rough idea of what it is, but what are the kind of the essential elements of it? Do you need to have imagination to have curiosity?
Mm-hmm. That's a really interesting question, Joel. Period of silence while the professor thinks. Do I need imagination to ask a question? Yes. Because if I can't imagine anything being any different than what's in front of me, and I have no interest in what's in front of me, if I have no interest in it, I'm not going to ask a question. If I have an interest in it, the interest comes from I wonder if, or I wonder about how that machine works, right? And so that's a kind of imagination.
So you have to be able to imagine an alternative outcome if you're going to ask a question.
What should I do? Yeah.
All right, so let's take it. One of my favorite things to do, we'll take it to the animal kingdom. We've got cats, right? Mm-hmm. And it's scientific. There's scientific literature linking cats and monkeys and a couple other animals to having curiosity. And you can define curiosity different ways, and there's definitely a definition that becomes exclusive to humans. But there is a definition that talks about cats and monkeys and these other things. They're curious. We've all seen the cat, extend his neck and kind of move his head back and forth and try to look between a doorway or do whatever they do. And they're
poke in a corner.
Yeah. So what's going on there? Is a cat imagining an alternative outcome? What is the motivation behind the curiosity for an animal? And is it the same as one for a human?
I have no way of knowing, no information other than anecdotal from having an abundance of cats. I have no idea what a cat thinks. Every time I anthropomorphize a cat, it's a mistake. It's a dead end. But I think that the very nature of looking, as you say, moving its head, something got its attention. It hears something and its ears flick up. It's as much as to say, what's that? But that is the uncertain thing. It's not like sometimes I have a cat, watches out the window in the enclosed porch, a big old truck goes by, and the cat sits up, ears perked, and is essentially saying, what's that? But it has a that to focus on. There's an object. But the curiosity is, I don't know if they're imagining, is it a danger? Is it something that's going to do something to me? But what's that is probably something that we share only at vastly different levels. If I hear a sound and say, what's that? There's a sound. Is it an anomalous sound? Is it out of place? What makes it out of place? My imagination is going to make up all kinds of things. What could it be?
Right. So I think that we're getting to the essence of the first question, which is, does curiosity require imagination? And I think in humans, it probably does by default. Humans probably can't be curious about something without automatically or instinctively imagining the answer to the question. But I think animals might be able to be curious without imagining an answer. And
I think
what leads me to believe that is I had a party at our house last night with our friends. And we were playing a card game, Family Feud, which everybody's seen the TV show. But one of the questions was, you come home and your front door is wide open. What do you do? And the top answers, from polling regular people, it was funny, the difference. One of them was call the police. And then the next two answers were run away or go into the house and investigate. which are two opposite,
yes.
two very opposite actions. And I think that's because humans can imagine alternative outcomes. You can, and it sort of depends on contextually and prior learning what your view is. If you live in a bad part of town or you've had certain life experiences and you see your front door open, you might think, I'm being robbed by a violent criminal. If you have different life experiences or you live in a different place, you might think, oh, my mother-in-law must use a spare key to get something out of the house. I'll go in and greet her. Or, oh, the lock on my front door is broken and the wind blew it open.
Yes.
So there's lots of things that go into that. I don't think a cat or a monkey can grasp that level. If you have a door that's closed and a sound comes from behind it, whether that sound is a monster that eats cats or a mouse that gets eaten by a cat, I don't think the cat is really imagining that scenario. It's just hearing the sound, and then there's a physiological instinct that says maybe it's food or
danger or whatever. But then the cat will reach his paw under the door, and at least my cats would, and rattle the door.
Yeah,
trying to open it. Rattle. So no matter what's in there.
Right. If you heard this deep growl, you hear Godzilla on the other side, obviously a human is going to run away. But a cat might still just kind of want to see what's on the other side, because that imagination probably isn't there.
I think I'm with you.
So I guess it would depend on your definition of curiosity. Just curiosity in general probably doesn't require imagination, but in human beings it probably
is unavoidable.
Yes, it's unavoidable. What about openness to experience? Do you think you have to be open to new experiences to be curious?
I do. I don't think that it's just one step and there you are. But I think if you're not open to new experiences, then you're going to rather in a recalcitrant way, you're going to say, I'm not going to ask questions. A, I'm not supposed to, or B, I don't want to, because C, I'm not really interested in knowing all of that. Just let me get on about my business. There's another name for that, and it's a kind of ignorance of a kind of narrowness that can really ultimately be dangerous to somebody in the end. I think that curiosity and imagination very much go hand in hand. I may be just too biased about it. But
right. Yeah, I'm thinking about this openness to experience one, and I'm wondering about it. Because, because I'm imagining a scenario, right, where let's say you have somebody who has a very strong political affiliation, and they're curious about a topic in current news. And so since they're curious about that topic, they go and start researching news articles about that topic. And let's say that the topic comes with very hard evidence that the view they supported is false. Now you have this cognitive dissonance that you're trying to quell. But research says that you're going to ultimately dispel the evidence and continue on with whatever your initial political leaning was. So you are curious. You're curious about what's going on, but you're not open to the new experience.
Exactly. You're curious about what other people are. You're curious what the gossip is. This is going back to the ancient Greek. What's the gossip from the other side on this topic?
Right.
Oh, I don't believe any of it because A, it's in the media, or B, because it's from the other side, or whatever it is. So I looked, it's nothing. I stay on my position. That's really intellectually dishonest. Intellectual honesty is being able to change your mind and say, oh, I've taken this information. Yeah, I was wrong. I didn't know that. Let's go, or IOED, the illusion of explanatory depth, where you think that you, somebody asks you, well, how does a phone work? Do you know how a phone works? Sure, I know how a phone works. Tell me. Oh. and you can either do the O and change the subject. You can do the O and say, no, I guess I really don't. It's sort of magic, isn't it? You push the button and things happen. But yeah, that openness is deeply important to true curiosity.
Right. because although that anecdote seems to indicate the openness to experience isn't necessary to curiosity, I think that that person probably is curious. But what they're curious about is trying to find new details that support their underlying beliefs.
Which is precisely the opposite of scientific curiosity, which is scientists are trained and ethically predisposed to take in as much information as possible and to actively seek things that will prove their idea wrong.
Right.
But what you just described is it's the standard high school research paper. Form a thesis, then go out and find a bunch of stuff to prove that your thesis is true.
Right.
Which means you're narrowing your view rather than saying, go out and find a bunch of stuff, see what it says, and then let's form an argument about how your argument has changed.
Yeah.
Which is much more open.
So where do we land on that? Do we need to have two separate ways of defining curiosity in that case? Because, or would you say that first, our political figure here isn't actually curious? He's something else.
No, I guess if you're going to qualify it in some way, I guess you're looking at two shades of definitions for curiosity. I think the first is what the Greeks were disparaging. I'm curious for some gossip, but I only want to hear the stuff that I want to hear. So what I'm really curious is what people are saying, but I don't care.
Right. Yeah.
That's not being open to any particular growth, deepening, education or change. It's just, what's out there.
So what we've kind of established here is that curiosity has a noble side and maybe not necessarily ignoble, but an idle or just sort of not necessarily growth-focused side. And probably the determining factor in it is openness to new experience.
And information. And data and all those things. I guess I like the word noble, but it probably sounds pretentious to people. But let's assert a different word. Deep curiosity is absolutely fundamentally pragmatic.
Right.
You can't. For instance, so let's say you're at at your workplace and you're managing, and a machine keeps breaking down. And if you or the person running the machine just say, well, I don't know why, we'll just keep unplugging and plugging it back in again, and it keeps functioning, that may work for a little while, but ultimately it's going to impede all the things that business is concerned about, efficiency and material use and expenditure of time and such. And so to me, the pragmatic, it's like the climate crisis. If it's not pragmatic to ignore the data. It's not patriotic. It's not pragmatic. It's foolish because you close yourself off and say la 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 with your fingers in your ears. I don't want to hear that. Well, that's not curious. And curiosity would say, well, what kinds of things, acknowledging that this is taking place, might it be useful to do?
Right. Yeah, really, it's a war of pragmaticism, really, and it's short-term versus long-term.
Yeah.
So it is more efficient and more pragmatic in the short term to continue doing what we're doing because we have the infrastructure and knowledge in place to use it efficiently, ignoring the consequences of the toll it's taking on the environment. The long-term solution, it's more pragmatic to develop the knowledge and infrastructure to have renewable resources in order to stem the issues that come along with overpopulation, depletion of resources, and all of the other things.
Curiosity would then, you can have narrative and artistic curiosity. Let me create a song about what I see happening. Let me tell a story that's science fictional about if we extrapolate from here, what's it going to look like in X amount of time. So it doesn't have to be preachy, and it doesn't have to be fundamentally absolutely useful and nothing else. But it should have one. I keep saying should. I should do that. If one is to be embracing curiosity, if one really embraces curiosity, one embraces that mostly things are unknown, and we want to try to know them.
Right. All right. So as far as establishing the essence of curiosity, I think that we're getting there now, and by getting there, we're really figuring out that it's a much bigger topic than you can put it in a box about. We started out talking about the Greeks and how they sort of disparaged it in favor of awe or wonder.
Yeah.
But in modern times, it seems like that awe or wonder is sort of incorporated into the word a little bit, but we still are hanging on to that old definition as well. So as a result, curiosity is a very multifaceted concept in modern language. And it has its dark sides and its light sides. And, with animals, it's something different than it is with humans. And there's a lot of different aspects to it.
What did you start with? Curiosity killed the cat.
Yeah.
And satisfaction
brought him back.
Brought him back. I can't help but think of Schrodinger's cat.
Yeah.
With curiosity. So the cat in the experiment is, you don't know if the cat is alive or dead until you look. Therefore, the cat is both alive and dead, imaginatively.
Mm-hmm.
Our curiosity about the cat is wide and in flux until we look and see what happened. It might be intellectually satisfying to say, yep, that kind of radiation did this, and the cat's dead. I'm satisfied that the information is accurate. I'm not satisfied the cat's dead, but I'm not sure. Now you've got me thinking about that old saw. How does satisfaction bring him back? That's an imaginative act.
Right. And let's talk about imagination a little bit, because it's very interesting as well. In the philosophical literature, you have all of these different theories about the philosophy of imagination.
Yeah.
And I'm reading them all. And I had also thought about Schrodinger's cat, because they talk about how, you can't imagine things that you haven't experienced, or all these different things.
Yes.
But what's funny is you can, I can imagine being an astronaut in outer space. Whether or not it's an accurate depiction, I can imagine it.
Of course.
Schrodinger's cat, you can't imagine. It's a very abstract, scientific sort of thing. You can't imagine an individual entity being both alive and dead at the same time. Because the cat's not a zombie, because we can imagine that. Okay, well, you're a zombie. You died and now you're alive. We can imagine that, even though that's not a real thing. So that sort of flies in the face of those theories. But Schrodinger's cat is a different type of problem.
It is.
The cat is both alive and dead at the same time. You can't imagine that. That's not something that at least that's what I would posit. You can't actually imagine the cat. But then that comes back because there's
an oscillation you can.
Right. There's also the philosophical distinction between first and third person perspectives. So they bring up, if you're imagining being Napoleon, let's say I'm imagining being Napoleon and how he planned out this battle. That's third person.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, if I was Napoleon, I would have done this, this, and this. But first person is if I were looking through the eyes of Napoleon and
I am
hearing through his
Napoleon.
ears.
Yeah.
And that's first person.
Mhm.
So, we from a third person perspective, we can imagine Schrodinger's cat because we can think to ourselves, well, the cat is either alive or dead in the box.
Mhm.
But from a first person's perspective, the cat is both alive and dead.
You
What is that?
Yeah.
It's not. You can't do it. It's not possible.
I just looked up the provenance of Curiosity Killed the Cat because I was just curious. First used in 1916 in the Washington Post to report the death of a cat whose curiosity proved fatal. A cat named Blackie. And it goes on to tell the story. Curiosity Killed the Cat is a proverb used to warn of the dangers of unnecessary investigation or experimentation.
That's a very Greek proverb.
Isn't it? What? Because how do you define what's unnecessary investigation?
Right.
Or experimentation.
And so I think that's where I think that this sort of traditional view that the Greeks had, or that, some of these people have, that's where it gets dangerous, is because you're looking at curiosity as being the one thing, which is a curiosity without imagination. Because like we just talked, I think that that's a really good anecdote that we came up with earlier, where you have a noise on the other side of a door. A cat, it doesn't care if it hears a mouse squeak or Godzilla, it's going to try to get behind the door. A human doesn't act that way.
No.
If a human hears a mouse squeak or a Godzilla on the other side of the door, they're going to have very different actions. So this idea that curiosity is somehow dangerous, I think it's a complete fallacy. A complete fallacy. Because although it could be dangerous in the terms of changing certain social mores, it could cause violence, it could cause revolution, it can cause danger. But in terms of being dangerous in the sense of a negative, self-harming sort of thing, even if somebody dies for their curiosity, there's a good chance that they did that knowingly. If they heard Godzilla on the other side of the door, they deemed that it was worth discovering what made that majestic sound and dying for it, rather than, oh, what is that? Oh,
Exactly.
now I'm eaten.
Exactly.
It's not stupid.
It's purposeful.
Yeah.
Purposeful curiosity. Good for you. That's you've brought us to a clarification. Horror film characters are enormously stupid, and that's why we have memes and advertisements about them. So, I wonder I hear a creaking sound, I hear shrieking, it's getting really cold here, there's a growling, I need to open the door.
Right
Because the script says so.
That comes back to our Family Feud game. You see your front door open.
Yeah.
Some people decide to run and some people decide to investigate, but those people are imagining different scenarios. So it's that thought of imagining.
The conscious choice, the deliberate questioning, I'm being curious for very specific reasons.
Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we've definitely gotten somewhere with the essence. So, why are we curious? What is the motivation behind it? Do you think that we've talked about? I think the animal motivation, it stems from physiological need. It's very behaviorist. We have a cat at work now. This cat, he lived next door at the cabinet makers. That's where he lives. He's very well fed, very well taken care of. But in the course of his wanderings, he came over to our place at some point. And of course, immediately people tried to usher him inside. And he was very wary at first. The curious cat, he has his neck extended, he's looking. He doesn't want to, and he'd get closer and closer each day. Finally, he came inside on a very cold day. He decided, oh, there's heat in here. I like heat and warmth, so I'll come inside. Oh, it's warm in here. And then he was fed, and now the cat is a regular. So I think that the curious drive for the cat is pretty self-evident. I don't think there's that deeper imagination going on there. The cat sensed warmth and came inside. The cat now was reinforced with food and with loving affection, and now the cat essentially has two homes. Curiosity has paid off for him. But in humans, do you think that's the case? Do you think that human curiosity originally stemmed from a similar property?
I think it's built into us. I'm with the philosophers who stopped asserting long ago that there's such a thing as natural law, capital N, capital L. There are laws of nature, but natural law, that we are such and such in a certain way and always will be. If we go to the Thog caveman paintings of Lascaux kind of character who is curious about the sounds outside and determining that we need to have extra spears because that sound seems dangerous. I don't have to go out and look to see the creature, whatever it is. I'm imagining, and therefore I'm preparing. So there's something of the cat in that. I think that for humanity collectively, there is a built-in curiosity. I don't think that it is so individually always. I think it's being trained away.
Yeah. So do you think that physiological curiosity that the cat feels, do you think that even with ancient people, it was something different from that? Or do you think that...
I do, because...
I think so as well, and I'll tell you why.
Yeah, I want to know.
You look at ancient humans and sort of how they spread around the world, right? I think it kind of goes against that capital N natural law that we're starting to disacknowledge, because I think that there's a need to explore, and there's a because think about it, humans were hunter-gatherers until they settled down very late in their evolution, right? But being a hunter-gatherer does not necessitate exploration,
Not on a huge basis. No.
Right. Now, if you exhausted your hunting grounds, you might move a few miles. But what are the chances you're going to chase a pack of, deer from South Africa to Russia? What's the chance that you're going to run out of berry bushes and have to go all the way to Russia or someplace, right? Or, Norway or something. That's not necessary. I think that certainly some migration is necessary to adapt to your environment. You'll have certain environmental impacts that you're going to have to try to mitigate through these avenues, right? Yeah. And cats and monkeys and things have these problems with territory disputes or with food shortages or that, those sorts of things, which certainly early humans would also have. But I don't think that accounts for all of early human behavior. I think that there is something else, and I think that exploration plays a big part in that. There's the curiosity that can't be accounted for with purely physiological drives. It's something beyond behaviorism.
There you go. There's your word. Beyond behaviorism is another. You've been coining a number of things today. I'm going back to the paintings on any number of caves. You don't need necessarily to paint a picture of that which you're going out to hunt. Now, there are all sorts of hypotheses about it. We still don't know. The most recent one I read was these pictures on the caves of Lascaux and so on were painted by adolescents who'd gotten drunk and had a party and were violating the space of their parents. I'm going to paint all over your walls, which I rather like, but they were still imaginative paintings. Here's what I imagine I'm going out to hunt, or here's my imagined reality of that thing which I went out after, or whatever it is. The storytelling is an imaginative act based out of curiosity, of extrapolating from experience and putting oneself in other perspectives and the curiosity of, well, how is it to live that way? Let me try to weave a story, but I better be very thoughtful in how and maybe I'm going to research and maybe I'm going to observe so that my curiosity will not be frivolous and it will be based on a credible extension. And so, yeah, I don't think animals don't do that, but we do. Why do you go onto the ocean? And yes, it ends up very badly when cultures collide. And our history is replete with that. But there can be an element of survival mixed in with an element of utter what's out there, which is where our space program used to be, and perhaps we'll get back to it. There's lots of talk about Mars now. There's lots of there's a very interesting TV show right now my wife and I have been watching called Mars, and it's fiction, but it's also based on documentary information of what we're developing in order for them. One of the primary purposes is the systematic belief that we are not going to survive as a species if we don't get off our planet. That when you have two different nests, you've doubled the possibility of keeping the species alive. Okay, there's that. But more often you ask any astronaut, and they're eager to find out, how is it there? Even though it might kill me. The characters in the show is very interesting because they said it's quite likely that Mars, when we land, will kill all of us. But we wouldn't do anything else but go.
Right. And you see, you go back to the original saying, curiosity killed the cat. And I think the people who coined that phrase would look at that as evidence that they're correct. Mm-hmm. Look at that. You're going to go to some place that's going to kill you all. Like that curiosity's bad. But no, you have to look at the motivations behind why somebody is deciding to do that.
Precisely.
And you're realizing that it's something that's being deemed worth it for a larger purpose.
Just sitting around in a static way is not human.
Mm. Yeah, exploration is the part of it. And you look at I remember a thing about the Polynesians who found Easter Island. Easter Island, out thousands of miles in the middle of the ocean, this tiny island. And these people knew that it was there based on how they were looking at the waves. Mm-hmm. And so, a lot of anthropologists are starting to think that these people knew exactly what they're getting into. They knew that it was this small island. They knew that it was extremely isolated and far away. And yet they decided to leave their mainland to go there. Mm-hmm. That doesn't come from adapting to your environmental problems. That doesn't come from trying to find food or these other. It's not a physiological drive. That is something else. That's going to Mars.
That's going to Mars. That's saying, let's find out if we can actually do this.
Right. Yeah. So I think that does a really good job covering the formative part. Now we're going to get into the speculative part, and this is going to be a really long episode because I know this is not going to be a short conversation. Last time we got together, I asked the question of whether we thought awe and the sublime was the origin of religion. Today I'm going to ask, is curiosity the origin of philosophy? So we kind of covered that a little bit earlier in this episode, how you had philosophy, which was caused by wonder, and you had, curiosity, and religion sort of capitalized on awe. And so awe really is kind of the origin of religion, not the other way around. I don't think awe stems from religion. I think religion capitalized on awe that was already present in human ability. Is curiosity the origin of philosophy? Do you think that being curious in the first place is how people developed systematic ways of thinking about things and became philosophers?
I do. If we go back to the tried and trite but true definition of philosophy as in the love of knowledge, philosophia, knowledge doesn't just happen.
Right.
There's a process. It's not one process. There are many different processes, right? But so there's behaviorist kind of process. Oh, this is how I learn to do things. And we won't go through all of those, but I think that without the question, the answer isn't going to emerge.
Hmm.
I sit here, I look, there's light coming through the blinds in your studio. And going back to your light thing. Well, all right. I can say, yeah, light. But I have to ask a question before I can get anywhere with it. Why is the light coming through as it does? Well, because silly, there's blinds there. Well, why do we call them blinds? and blinds can be canted different ways. That's to direct the light to different directions. Why do we want to direct the light in different directions? No. I don't think we get to knowledge without that questioning.
Yeah, and this kind of comes back to what we were talking about with, education. And one of the things I was reading about from a professional educator talking about sort of the state of the field at this point was they're saying that children are born scientists. A 2-year-old is a scientist.
Absolutely.
Because, like you said, you don't think that there's an answer without the question. You don't think that, purposeful inquiry, knowledge doesn't just happen. And I think a lot of people would look and say, well, look at a kid learns all kinds of stuff and they're not asking questions. They are. It may not be a verbal thing, but you see kids picking something up and dropping it, or, trying to lift something heavy, or trying to, wobble around on their 2 feet.
Push on something and fall backward.
Right.
And then get up and push on it again.
Yeah.
Why did I go? All the questions are implicit, and they are there. I'm enjoying my granddaughter very much, and that's very much there. So now she's gotten to the place where there are words happening. Most especially that, and sometimes it's that. It sounds like an assertion, but it's not. It wants to know, goes over, touches it. I have a set of a bell ornament that she takes, and it has a little stained glass in it, and I hang on to it, and she spins it. Whenever she picks up a picture in a frame, she looks at the picture. Yeah, it's narcissistic. There's pictures of her, and she likes that. But there are any picture. But then she'll turn it around in your hand and look, and the eyebrows go up, and then she turns it back. She's questioning, why is it there and not here? You can see that happening.
Yeah, and I almost think that there's 2 sorts of ways that you start to philosophize or be curious about something. And one of them is that very natural way that a child learns things. And I think a child's asking a lot of those simple questions, like you were talking about the light. Oh, hey, there's the light. Why do they call these blinds? What about the angle of it? If the light's coming at this angle, where's the sun in the sky? And those are things that the kids are sort of learning innately through the questions that they're asking and experiencing. And I think there's another part which is more purposeful as you get older, where you may have experienced something your whole life and you know things about it from those things that you learned as a kid. Mm-hmm. But then it's that re-examination, where, the first guy to wonder about what's that light in the sky, the sun. It's not that he had never experienced the sun before. He'd experienced the sun before. He knew that it was warm. He knew it was bright. He knew things about it from asking questions innately as he grew. Mm-hmm. But the re-examination led to a deeper question and a deeper understanding because of that question. And that's the kind of stuff I'm interested in. I'm not, pedagogical teaching and learning methods are interesting, but I think andragogical or even gerontogogical, which is a word I'm pretty sure I just made up, but should exist.
It does now. You just created it.
It should exist.
Why did you make that word up?
Because that's interesting to me. I think that you look at the biology and the anatomy and the psychology behind learning, and what you find is that as people get older and as neurons prune and myelin thins and all of these other things, people become less curious, less creative, less open to experience. And as a result, they just generally learn less. And I don't know if that's a cultural thing or necessitated by biology, but
it may be mitigated by biology, but it's not necessitated by biology, because you have people who consciously choose to learn a language, which we know now you can at age 60, 70, or 80. It's not this. So why do we do that in the gerontological sense?
Right. So that's the thing that I'm thinking of is, I mean, I obviously have an interest in pedagogical things because I want to stay in that mindset of the childlike sort of inquisitiveness, because even, I don't want to ask the simple questions that a child asks that I already know the answer to, but I want to stay in that mindset of what's the next question about this thing that may seem very mundane on the outset. Anything that seems mundane, there's always something more to it. You're just not thinking about it hard enough. So I like the pedagogical, or a child's mindset. But I don't think that there's anywhere near enough focus on adult learning, as evidenced by the fact that I had to make up a word to describe learning in older people. Right. I don't think it exists. Maybe I'm
thank
wrong,
you for answering that, because I know, right. So do we, curiosity is about making, let's try this out. The conscious decision, as you say, as an adult, to ask the next question, not in a childlike way necessarily, but for the same purposes, which is to find out what's underneath, or to when you described it in one of our talks before about the process of making music and the process of setting yourself a problem. I'm going to make music with X, Y, or Z instrument only, or I'm going to try a new set of settings. And there's a question implicit in that. Why? Why did you do that? And the answer is, you wanted to, but that's not. But you wanted to. Why?
I guess I just wanted to have the answer. I wanted to do.
What's it like to make music this way?
Right.
Instead of making it the same way, I think you said to me, I wanted the challenge of having the narrowness. And this is where it gets maybe almost paradoxical. What? I wanted to narrow myself. You're sitting here gabbling away about widening and deepening and all of that. Well, yes, if I limit my tools, what can I accomplish? And that can be very surprising.
Yeah, and I think that why it seems so paradoxical or strange is because of what we were just talking about. Is that, and I remember that talk, talking about, okay, well, if you just know guitar, then you can only make music a certain way. So as I learned guitar and bass and drums and mandolin and all these other instruments, and then as I learn all these different recording techniques, and as I learn all these different mixing techniques, all of a sudden, right, I can make any kind of music I want. I can do jazz or rock or pop or any of these things, right? But what the sort of analogous part to that would be like the natural philosopher who gets so used to the sun that it's just something that's there, right? Because you have all of that knowledge. And the more knowledge you have, the more the topic in general starts to become mundane. So music itself starts to become mundane the more you know about it. So how do you how do you destroy that?
The mundanity.
The mundane. You have to take a certain thing and look at it more closely than you've ever looked at it before.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly where the narrowing comes in. I have to really focus on, okay, well, what is it about, the keyboard that I've never played before or I've never looked at? All right, now I'm going to essentially lock myself into trying to, and that's a good word. It's sort of like an escape room. Okay, well, now I've locked myself in this room with only a certain number of tools. How do I get out? And you solve a problem. You're solving a problem, and I think that's what you're looking for. That's what curiosity for adults should be, is looking at that thing, looking at politics, the political institution, and thinking, like you said, what makes a good politician? Because that's not the question that's being asked.
No,
it's not. People, well, who would make the best president? How about what makes the best president?
What makes the best president?
Not who, but what, and I think that's the curiosity that we're looking for is,
is to articulate.
We all know what politics is. It's become mundane. It's become something that's, because we have that, I feel like there should be a term for it, but we have that intuitive learning that we've all experienced and kind of developed. But now we need that re-examination to look at something through all of the other knowledge we have and sort of hone in on, but what is it? What should it be? And that's kind of what we try to do with the program, is define the essence of something, cover our prior knowledge, and then ask, but what should it be?
What's the problem, right? We're always looking for, like back to Mars or any science fiction, but surely in science fact, if you have a group of people, Apollo 13, you're in a little tin can spinning around wildly. You've got limited resources. How do I survive? How do I make this stop? How do I turn this into a successful experience? How do I, rather MacGyver-like, with let's see, I'll assess what I have. I have some cable, some dirt, limited oxygen, and how do I turn that into survivability for a number of people? So that's curiosity. As you said, it's among other things, it's problem solving. But you have to ask what the problem is in the first place in order to solve it.
Right. So that's the last question. Gets us to our last question. Is curiosity a form of creativity?
It leads potentially to creativity. It implies creativity. What do you think?
I think what it comes down to is if we consider knowledge an art or a product of its own, or if knowledge merely leads to the construction of something. I think if we consider knowledge on its own to be something, then it probably is, curiosity is creative. But if knowledge on its own is not purposeful or applicable, then curiosity is probably not creative.
Curiosity needs a question, implied or stated, in order to create knowledge or to manipulate knowledge. But the in order to suggests that curiosity is the spark to the fire. It's the spark to the tinder. It's not the tinder itself.
Yeah, it's kind of... it's a difficult one. I was reading an article on neuroscience this week about the CMN, the cognitive mode network.
Okay.
And what that is essentially, they put some people in fMRI and they'd ask them questions that required them to answer things.
Mhm.
But then what they were actually studying, it was kind of a red herring. What they were studying is what the people's brain was doing when they were told to just think about nothing or let their mind wander. And that's what the fMRI was actually studying. What they found is that certain parts of your brain light up when you're not thinking about anything at all. And based on the sections of the brain that are lighting up, what they think is happening is that you're taking knowledge and you're integrating it with things that you've known before. So your daydreams or your mind wanderings or all these other things, they're really not purposeless. They're connecting with knowledge that you
Have acquired.
have, or things that you've done. So it's almost as if your brain is constructing new knowledge there. So you're having something be constructed there. And that almost seems like a creative act to me. If you're taking two distinct types of knowledge and you're making a new type of knowledge.
That is creative.
You're creating.
You are.
So you're creating knowledge. And the act of creating knowledge create creativity. So...
But curiosity is not a verb.
Right.
Creating is. Well, let's make up another word. I can be curiositying. But curiosity can be, as we said at the beginning, an object that we find strange and compelling. It's a characteristic. It's not the process itself, but without the characteristic, the process doesn't happen. I'm being old school.
Yeah, so we're almost getting into like an Inception-like loop where it's really your brain is doing a creative act by integrating new knowledge, and that new knowledge is coming out as curiosity. It's really kind of a...
It is a Mobius strip.
Yeah. So I think that was a fun episode because I think that we did a lot of very rigorous looking at the topic.
Yeah.
And I think we came to some answers, and there were some that we opened some more can of worms. And
you like opening those cans.
It demonstrates the topic as a whole. So, and I think even more so, the topic of curiosity has the potential to lead us into several other topics. By asking the questions in this one, it leads us to some other questions about what's the philosophy of education, or what's the philosophy of creativity, or some of these other things.
Let's do that.
So we'll see. Who knows where it'll take us? But I'm sure we have some interesting avenues to explore in the future. So until next time, keep pondering.